For those of you just joining us, Christopher Lyon,
Garett
Professor Lyon here with us today. This is going to be a fun, quick show today, but I got to tell you, we got 6 wines in front of us, man. Like, how fast are we going to fly through these? So this is known as the kind of the Cellar Discovery Flight today, where we went through, and when you have we took over an older winery, and we've been kind of spelunking through the caves of their library. And occasionally we find these little kind of serendipitous flights. And so I thought it would be fun after doing our kind of year-end flashlight in the cellar in the corners. We found a 6-year vertical of a Zinfandel that was known as Coeur Du Val back in the day. They only made it for, I want to say it's 6, maybe 8 years. It really didn't last that long because the whole thing about Elyse has always been single vineyard wine. And sometimes when you're blending a single vineyard wine, you need a vehicle to go, I'm only going to put the best barrels from that single vineyard and put the single vineyard on it. I've got these other barrels in the cellar that are absolutely fantastic. They just didn't sing in that choir. What can we play with, or what inspiration can happen there? And so the genesis behind this wine was to take kind of flesh from Rutherford met with structure and backbone from St. Helena and kind of make the two meet up and have fun in the bottle with it. And so we're doing a 6-year vertical of Coeur Du Val today on the show. 92, 93, 94, 95, 96, 97. There's nothing more gratifying than telling our staff today that this was the flight we're doing, and how many of them raise their hands going, wasn't born yet. Yeah, so that's really awesome for some of us here, man, you know. Preservation, older wines, library wines. Anybody that's experienced with aging their own wine will, I think, have a different understanding of wine of this nature. And I gotta say, I'm gonna turn this over to Brother Garett here. I always felt that you had a very clear sense of not only the way California ages, but I think a more worldly palate. I think you've appreciated wines from a lot of different parts of the planet than a sort of narrow-minded, monochromic guy like me. Chromatic? We're running with that. What you got? Talk to me about, when you walk in to taste older wine, is there a different mindset that you kind of approach it with?
Yes, and I think whenever people are working within one area, for me, for you, it's Napa Valley wine, so they're going to be more leading with fruit, the majority of what we're tasting. So we can kind of get into a house palate to where if it's not leading with fruit and in a different style, it can be kind of a shock and a jolt to the senses because we're not used to it. Yes, I drink a lot of old world wine with friends, so at least that kind of leaves me open to some of the flavors where people would kind of describe as barnyardy or earthy or tobacco and leather and all of that. And when you're diving into old world wines, even Napa or California old world wines, if they were made balanced with balanced acidity so they can hold up like these, that fruit's not going to be the star of the show anymore, and you're going to get more of those secondary, tertiary flavors. But if you're not used to them, it doesn't mean they're bad, it's just your palate's not used to them. So these are definitely along those paths. And actually, we haven't even tasted these, so I'm just smelling this for the first time.
It's not until you taste an old wine like this that all of a sudden frog's legs in a aspic gelée makes sense, you know, and some of these bizarre French menus sometimes. The food looks weird on a menu, and then you try an older wine, and your brain goes, all of a sudden smoked sturgeon makes total sense, man. I can totally see where that fits. Now, my first flush on this wine is, absolutely, it's old, but it is a color sound wine. This has not really broken down. It's not cloudy. It has not really kind of broken apart. The fruit's there, man. Yeah. There's got a really interesting, I can totally see why some people can misidentify Zinfandel sometimes as older Bordeaux.
For sure.
There's almost an older, I'm not going to say Burgundy, but there's almost a Burgundy kind of note to this wine that's got, maybe it's the earthiness that's ringing that bell for me. We're always fascinated when we taste wines like this, and some of our fun clients that want to come by and taste with us, like Garett, have these global palates, and so it's always fascinating to hear somebody go, "Oh my God, this reminds me of an old Tempranillo," or reminds me of an older Chateau Moussard, from warmer conditions, But I love that kind of perspective to put this wine. on the nose, it wasn't immediately making me want to jump in on this, but it's really quite nice.
It is
like,
really
bad.
I was,
the fruit
I
on
was
this
surprised.
Yeah, man.
To see, there's the fruit is more dried, but not raisinated and pruny like you'll get from a lot of California old wines.
And just to put a quick 10-second perspective on this, we're going to move as quickly as we can through these wines. 92, okay, we can talk about winemaking, but 92 was not a spectacular condition of weather elements for us to play with. What you basically had was, here in Napa, because of how hot it gets, we get coastal storms that roll over the top of the valley. Sometimes the mountaintops actually receive more rain than the valley floor does because they kind of trap those clouds on the way over. And so 92 was one of those years where a lot of the valley, it was bloody wet in the springtime, and then you had a mild summer. So I don't have enough heat to get rid of all that water. But places like Rutherford were the old riverbed, so the water drains through Rutherford naturally.
Yeah, great drainage.
So Rutherford's used to those growing conditions on a yearly basis. It reacts better with experience than maybe a mountaintop that's not used to that much water and dealing with it. So if you really look at 92 across the board, Rutherford, as an appellation, as a group of growers and farmers, survived 92 better and more spectacularly than a lot of other areas of Napa did. Now, this isn't scientific, but we did a little back homework, and rainfall and the amount of rain can have a lot to do with ripeness and early satisfaction with some of these wines, but it can also mean longevity is not going to be the same. Sometimes the heavier rain years aren't as flashy out of the gates, but man, with a little time in the cellar, they can really show well down the road as a more balanced aged wine. So this is again where the fork in the road comes in our wine world, right? Am I going to just fall in love with this thing right out of the gates, or am I going to let this sit in the cellar and all of a sudden I'm having a lightly smoked salmon one afternoon with a wine like this, and your brain goes, holy Toledo, that's perfect, you know? I can't predict that. I love when people ask us this question, right?
How long are wines going to age? Yeah. Yeah, I always break that into 3-part at least questions. It's okay. Here is one, my opinion. Here are what probably the people selling it or the critics will say. But then your palate, always trust your palate. If you know you like young, fruit-forward wines, 30-year-old wine is probably not for you.
Italians would go crazy for this one.
Oh, yeah. And just people into older world wines, they're holding up beautifully.
How do you tell when a wine has aged too much?
This was the conversation that's going to be endless. I'm gonna let Garrett field that question.
Yeah, and that's a loaded question too. When is too much too much? That's another loaded. So for your palate, if you don't like a wine, but you had it 10 years prior and you liked it, then you know it's aged too much. But somebody else that really loves 30-year-old wines could take that same wine that you don't like and love it. So I think we should, instead of say, how long should a certain wine age, how long should a certain wine age for my palate? Yeah. And then do that for yourself, because it doesn't matter if a billion people in the world absolutely love all of these wines. If it doesn't fit your palate, then it's not for you.
We're talking about competition. That's the wine world. When a wine is younger, the fruit, the alcohol, the oak, everything is competing for your attention, the acidity. As the wine gets older, the competition goes away, and now they're all singing in the band together. And so sometimes when people ask me, how long is this wine going to last, I always focus it on, well, what do you love about it today? You love the way it smells, but it feels really strong, or it's a little dry. So we focus on, if you love the way it smells, wait 5+ years, the wine's going to actually naturally integrate, and I think you're going to find the love affair continuing with that aspect. But it's always, for us, it's like, what is it that you loved about it today that made you ask that question?
And also the grape variety too. I mean, we're doing Zinfandel, which normally Zinfandels are not something that you age for 38 years? Is that where we're at?
I can't do math anymore, man.
28 years. 28 years, sorry.
Paradox of retrograde progress.
I'm just aging myself.
The more advanced we become, I'm getting dumber every day, man.
Also, we have this all up here, and I tried to think of where I was at. So in 92, I wore this jacket because it reminded me of what my 8th grade history teacher would wear all the time, and I was in 8th grade at the time. What did you do? You were already having kids.
92, I was just out of jail again. I was traveling with the dead as a tattoo artist. It's a really bizarre story. No, 92 put me in Stockton, California, and I was
Motorcycle
still
game?
on the weekends. I was still in the hotel business, and I was designing. I was convinced in those years that even if we were doing a party for 300 people, I was never okay with bad service. I wanted to create restaurant service for the biggest number of people ever. Like, I was fascinated by the moment we could create in large party service. So 92 for me was working in Stockton, California at the Stockton Hilton, man. Designing events and putting like those moments together kind of thing, man.
That was probably the place. One of the
Stockton
places kind of.
is one of the most bizarre towns I've ever lived in. There was a lot of fun that happened in that town. The Hilton family, if anybody wants to do the history with Conrad Hilton and Barron and all that, that was where Hollywood went to duck hunt back in the day. So anyway, there was this really interesting kind of subculture of kind of the elite greatest, and use that as the kind of their duck hunting weekend place out of LA. And so anyway, not to belabor the point, but that was 92 for me. It was just kind of, it was one of those years. And as we talk, I want you to overlap this. This flight for me, 92 is what now was. That's how you know it's a live show, folks.
There's Bo and Penny.
92 represents the way Napa was made for decades. When we got to 97 is where the modern winemaking, I think, for Napa emerges. We're actually seeing in 6 vintages the evolution of Napa, waking from a kind of the flowers are on the vine, so I mark my calendar 120 days later and we pick regardless, to much more soil science, much more vineyard alignment science. There was a whole concentration. And by 97, we got into Silicon Valley heating up. The wine business went crazy. The rating systems went absolutely off the charts, and the Parkers and the Spectators and the enthusiasts and everybody went off and created this whole maelstrom of opinions in the wine business. And you saw the wine business change to satisfy a whole different echelon of wine drinker. And so anyway, this is kind of the 6 years I think where a lot of that happened for us in California.
And also, as we get through all of these wines, the alcohol, whereas now Zins are easily in the 14% alcohol, and that's kind of the norm. And that's great. They're not going to have as long a longevity, but they're still, I mean, they can still, if they're well-made wines, go 10, 12, even 15 years. Now, these alcohols and these wines, 12.9%.
Yeah.
I mean, that's right there with Bordeaux's.
That's why I bring up Europe, because I think
long
this is,
ago,
from a sensibility standpoint, this is much more of a European approach to winemaking at that,
Very much so.
level of alcohol. And again, most of the lessons learned in this era of winemakers was Europe still teaching us how to make wine. Our identity in California took a few pioneers. It really did. It took the Robert Mondavis, you know. It took the why does my brain go blank at the worst time ever? It took some of these, the Joe Heitzes of the world, Bell and Barney Rhodes, man.
Burgess.
Oh my God. Tom Burgess, you know, it took this group of people to take California and go, well, we want a California personality in our wines. And this is kind of this era where that all really started to define itself for sure. And I'm telling you, if you go and do all your internet history, look up all of these vintages. The press wasn't super excited about these wines, man. So once we're moving up to 93. So now we got 92 with all of its challenges. Now we get to 93. 93 was another tough year. There was just rain from Thanksgiving all the way to Easter, man. I mean, it was wet. So for quick education is sometimes when you get a lot of rain like that, a plant is a plant. We starve it of water and nutrients to get it to make riper fruit. So in those years, these guys were thinking tons per acre, not intense single vineyard wine. So rainy years, they just let the flowers and the crop go.
A lot of fruit, high volume,
there, man. And that tended to kind of dilute a little bit of the intensity. I think some of these sites might have been capable of modern farming. And then you had a problem where when you've got a wet year and super mild temperatures all summer, the habit is to pull leaves off your vines and get that sunshine in there and get those grapes to ripen. Well, you also run into something called sunburn. So all of a sudden you pull all these leaves off on a 72-degree day in August, and all of a sudden 2-degree day hits you in September. You got zero shade and protection. So the outside of the grape gets this crust on it. It literally sunburns, and you really can't use that fruit anymore. So anyway, lessons learned. This 6-year vertical we're looking at is literally a lesson learned about farming and making California, really, if I had to look at it as an overall concept.
When you were just talking about that, and with the 92 and 93 years in particular, I thought of an analogy for all you winter snow buffs out there. Really, I have a feeling there'll be a great correlation between really wet winters for Napa and Sonoma and amazing ski and snowboarding years in Tahoe.
Yes.
Because every time, right before a season or right after a season that was a little wet, a little cold, it's usually a really good snow season. So the 10-11 winter, maybe actually it was the 11-12 winter, super wet, great snow, and all that water kind of subsided, and then 12 led to an amazing vintage, a lot of water in the soil.
Good tomatoes make bad wine.
There you go. But I have a feeling, just thinking about like that 92-93 winter was a really good
epic
ski
snow
season,
years.
and 93-94. But then the rain let up at the the beginning of 94, and then led to what was an epic vintage for Napa, which we're not there yet.
93 for me is actually it's taking a while to kind of wake up. She's a little closed down, and it's still got tannins. I mean, this has still got some grip to it, and that makes me think a lot about stem contact. And this is just to go to the next level for esoteric information, but when you're fermenting grapes, if you do pure grapes, you get those luscious flavors and the fruit driven and all of this. When you include the little, what we call jacks, the little pieces of green stem that are still kind of attached to the grapes that bounce along on our sorting tables, it brings a whole different collection of flavors because you're still leaching all of that out into the liquid. And stem can bring tannin, it can bring earthiness, it can bring some of the pyrazine, the greenness kind of thing in the wine. Yeah. And in this era of winemaking, that was embraced because that's the way Europe did it. I mean, so again, these are really interesting concepts to get through. The 93 for me right now is a wine I want to try tomorrow.
That's
I want to
interesting.
see
So
this open up and
for
see
me,
it really,
in the glass, I think on the palate it's much more inviting than the nose necessarily. Not that the nose is horrible, but it's a little dirtier, a little funkier than the 92 was. But on the palate, you're right about the tannins and the acidities there. It's a really balanced wine. I think old world lovers will really like the wine.
Yeah. The other thing I think is challenging is when we're offering these kind of wines to clients, which all 6 of these are available for you adventurers out there. These are, once they're aged like this, they are never in my world ever meant to be drunk alone. These wines are so essential to accompany. You have to design the food that's going to play with these wines and know going in that you're going to need some fat. So that's where charcuterie and salamis and the prosciuttos
and it doesn't have to be this big extravagant meal, but really just have different things to play off of.
But they definitely need a little food companionship, I think, to make the wine make sense. And I think you would be blown away to taste them on their own and then try them with food. And I really...
Also, one thing that's big for me, and it goes with any of these wines, it goes with older wines, it also goes with those bottles that you just absolutely love. Don't put them on a pedestal, like up here, and design this whole event around one bottle, because you're setting yourself up for failure. Just have fun sharing it with your friends, and it's going to be one. If you've got 6 people, everybody gets, a little more than, or a little less than a glass, and you enjoy it. Also, I've done this with wines, and I've seen so many people do it. When you open the bottle and you smell it, and you're like kind of scared, you throw a little bit in the glass, and it surprises you in a bad way. Don't dump it out. Leave it on the counter. Just set it to the side. It's obviously not ready for your palate yet. Probably not ready for my palate yet. But leave it there. Even if you come back to it the next day. I wouldn't necessarily say that about old wine, like 30, 25-year-old wines like this, because oxygen can take them down really fast. But they can be really good in an hour or two.
So 94 was one of my first vintages where I came to the Napa Valley, and I was like, hey, that's delicious.
We're already talking about 94 on the chat.
Yeah, it's 94 was that year. It was they had learned a little bit of reducing yields. So now tonnage wasn't the game. The quality game had started to really kick in. I think we improved yeast strains. I think we were able to live and make dry wine at slightly riper bricks, sugar in the grapes. That's a big thing. In the old days, these wild yeast ferments and even inoculated ferments could only live to about 13 to 13.5% alcohol because it would kill the yeast and you're left with sugar in your wine. So again, esoteric geek information, but yeast strain development allowed us to make dry wine at higher and higher alcohols and riper, which created more and more flavors and bigger and denser creations. And so again, this is the evolution. As we kind of develop better yeast strains, we develop more intense wines. 94 to me was one of those fulcrum years in California. We'd actually had a chance to replant from the 70s phylloxera era. We had really started to go, Cabernet does here, the Merlot likes it wet, the Franc likes it over here. We'd really started to parcel out our plantings much more intensely.
That's what I was going to talk about too. There was a big replanting in the 80s. So, sometimes even in 91, which was another great year, and we did that our last show, one Zinfandel from 91, and we were both pleasantly surprised by that wine.
Wow.
But if you think, let's say somebody replanted in 87, now this is kind of the 7th year, maybe 8th year, and that's a really good start to the lifespan of a vine.
Wow, the 94 is
really
just
cool.
like ready for lampshade.
Yeah, the fruit.
Oh my God, right?
Kind of taste some of that.
Yeah, that's really funny. What's that?
One of the like lamb pancetta tomato sauce.
There's a inherent, I'm not going to say juniper, but it's almost like that foresty kind of like venison juniper right in the middle of this wine. That's really interesting.
I get some cherry cola.
Yeah.
Which is really cool.
And I always thought that game with juniper and tarragon and roadside fennel, all of that is kind of a Rutherford also benchmark for me. I find a lot of that in and that's possibly just because that's where the water kind of collected and that's where all the wild stuff was growing down by the road. Who knows? But the 94, again, very structured.
Yeah.
There's a framework. There's still a full framework in this wine, man. This almost needs, I need a little something, some duck fat. I need something with a little fat involved in this, man.
Yeah, maybe duck rillette and pate and all sorts of things. But yeah, I'm really impressed. I'd say the body of these two wines, it's getting steadier and steadier so far as we've gone along.
So for educated fan base out there that immediately started chiming in about 94, I'm not going to get into serious math with you guys, but almost a third of the rain from 92 and 93. Much lower reduced rainfall. And whenever you grow grapes of this quality, you're always going to play this game, this game with the ocean, man. Some years she's your best friend in the whole world. Some years she's not. And we'll talk about it in some of the following vintages. The weather has been pretty brutal when you live this close to the ocean and an inland and a transverse valley. We're bringing all kinds of kind of craziness to the equation. And again, in those years, the farmers were excellent at what they did, but they were still thinking like a cotton or a soybean or a corn farmer. Like this whole vineyard is treated the same way. Mm-hmm. I think as you get closer to the late 90s and the early 2000s, those vineyards became patchwork quilts, and they understood that there was a difference farming and alignment that was required on all of that.
Yeah, there's certain parts where water drains in a certain section of a vineyard. Also, during this time, and then obviously in the years to come, the farmers have realized a lot of times they plant cover crops. We always had the mustard festival in, February or March?
Absolutely.
Which is great, and mustard is a great cover crop. For the winter time, you need to reintroduce nitrogen back into the soil. But they also realize, one, there are other cover crops like mustard and legumes, beans. But in areas like the valley floor where water collects a lot, after you mow the cover crop down and you mulch it, if you've just had a really wet year and there's a bunch of water in that soil, it's necessary to try and sponge up some of that water. And so some people are doing just really thick grass, Sudan grass, and so you plant it.
Vetch, red rye.
It grows up to 3 feet. You mow it, and it grows, and then all of a sudden you start to see the slowdown in its growth. And now that you know
beans.
that you're
God,
getting
the white flowers of fava
and
just
mix
6
things
feet
up
high.
there, but you know that you're doing a good job of sponging that water. And now that puts the stress back on the vines, and that's what you want to get complex flavors.
Napa's got to be one of the only parts of the world where sometimes we look at our vineyard and go, the soil's just too good. Like, I could spit a tomato seed out and I would grow the greatest tomatoes later this year. Some of our soil is really nutrient rich, which is not, the whole valley is a river valley. So the further you get away from where the old riverbeds were and into the more kind of extreme conditions with the gravels and rocks, that's where most of the sexy wine is happening. But we've learned techniques to grow into those richer soils and kind of exhaust the vine a little bit to get to leaner flavors. But it's really fascinating. When I started looking at these vintages in a row and thinking about it, the learning curve is so evident when you look at these wines as we go, okay, so now I got less rain. What do I do differently in the vineyard, you know?
Yeah, really cool. Duck confit with some cherry jus compote. Bouchon makes an excellent duck confit.
Since you're so much better at this than me, would you pick that as Zinfandel?
I don't know if I'd pick any of them as
The
Zinfandel.
tannins are what would make me think Cabernet, right? Like, my brain would think this is an old Napa, you know. What is it that Cabernet would tell me that it's different, you know? Okay, 95, man.
Maybe I would,
Yeah?
but that's also because I know what it is.
Yeah. We'll have to do a we'll do a Pepsi challenge tasting.
I don't think the
one of these
tannins
days,
are
man.
as big as it would be if it was a Bordeaux.
So actually, we're going to have to put this tasting together. We're going to let everybody at home know what we're tasting, but none of us on camera will know what we're tasting.
That would be fun.
And watching us banter back and forth about what we think it is, and watch people go, no, don't go towards the light. You know?
And then they'll see how full of ish we are.
You know, we know enough MSs and professionals in the industry. We can make this a really interesting Zoom tasting where we can bring other people into the platform to taste the same wines. That could be,
That would be fun.
Any of you that haven't done these Zoom tastings yet, you need to jump in with us. Call the winery, go onto our website.
Oh, wow.
Picking a collection of wines and tasting with us on camera, it really is a lot of fun. And we're building so many of these events that it's fun to kind of go library wine into current release wine and really see, like, people are like, well, how long is it going to last? I'm like, well, try one 15 years ago and watch them go, no, I think I like the new one. Or like, you're right, I totally don't like all that alcohol and intensity. Maybe I like the older wine. But until you taste it, you'll never know. So,
Wow, this has got some really cool menthol.
yes. Oh, wow. Yeah, right?
The
So
nose
Marcus
on this
Vineyard, Joe Heights, God bless you, man. Thank you for all of your hard work and giving us the shoulders to stand on. Embracing this eucalyptus nature in a wine, or this almost menthol nature in a wine, was, I think it was fun in his era. I think as time went by, people didn't know what to do with it. 95, let me tell you about 95. Okay,
Yeah.
so if you could have put on paper one of the worst, like, weather years to try to grow and make wine in, we had intense winter flooding. I mean, the whole thing about Napa is, again, for those of you that don't know, is the whole Napa Valley, Stone Mountains, River Valley, ocean. Okay, when high tide comes in at 6 o'clock and we're still raining an inch an hour, the water's got nowhere to go.
I forgot. We got floods in those years.
Yes, we did. And
95,
so when
96.
the tide comes in and the rain tries to drain out, the valley fills up. And our Napa River is only capable of handling that for about 3 weeks. After that, it's just like gurk, and the water it's just everywhere.
So I was going to Vintage High School here in town during those times. In 95, 96, we had floods both years. And the creek that runs through Vintage, and we were closed for school because the school was flooding.
Yeah.
Really, downtown Napa was flooding heavily, and Silverado Trail, that whole area flooded big time. So thank you, Army Corps of Engineers, for fixing downtown so it doesn't flood like that anymore. But yeah, I remember people getting expelled for rafting down because like you had to duck to not get hit by the cement bridge.
Right.
I mean, really duck.
And then, so you get all this rain. So now you got a plant that we've started. So it's a vine, right? People forget it's a grapevine. You look at these controlled plants when you come to Napa, but these are vines.
Yeah.
They want to sprawl, man. So
They're
now these
survivors,
vines
too.
are just shooting all this growth out in 95. And then, just to make 95 more awesome, we get a hailstorm in like April. And the word is shatter and bruise. These little hail pellets, they kind of scar the vine. They knock flowers off, which means you get a lot less fruit per acre. Now, what we've learned in the modern era is crop reduction early on is actually a pretty good thing to do. So sometimes the serendipity of having these cataclysmic conditions mean normally they were selling by the ton and cropping much heavier than we do today. So sometimes these cataclysms would reduce yields, and people would sit around going,
all right.
Have you tasted this? Like, this is pretty awesome, man, you know? So those natural reductive elements that happened can sometimes create the education that we use today to go, we're reducing it on purpose now because we realize that there's a finite amount of that intensity.
Yeah, and we're usually, I mean, what'd you say, April-ish is when that hail kind of thing happened? Yeah, and you would usually be dropping fruit come like June. I mean, it all depends on when the fruit shows up, when you prune.
Yeah.
But this is incredible. I've always known 91, 94 through 97 to be the years.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to hear that 95 was so challenging, but kind of makes sense. 2010 is people talked about that during the growing season and nobody had expectations for it, but all of us in the Valley know how good 2010s are.
Wow.
This 95 is really impressive to me. So far, this is my winner of the flight. That 94 was really good. All of them I'm pleasantly surprised by. We go into these shows like not knowing what we're going to get.
Okay.
And we're like, oh, can we keep a straight face if it's not? And honestly, he'll lie to you. I will not. But sorry, throwing you under the bus.
Wasn't that the Raymond Smollett? He always tells the truth. He always lies. If you're only going to ask us one question, how can you tell who's who?
I'm really impressed with this wine.
And again,
complexity. The nose is beautiful.
There's enough structure. Like she's not. I mean, you're not going to get any better. But this thing has still got plenty to go.
Yeah, all of these too. I mean, if you're buying them, and we can put together a cool 6-pack or 2 bottles of each. But
what's on this note is the perfect way to find out how much you do like your wine aged.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's very hard to try vertical.
And also with a 6-pack, do it like we're doing it. Have 6 to when we can get more than 8 people together.
Yeah.
Have them together and open them all.
Yeah.
Just have fun with them.
Yeah. I think it would be funny to mix them all up and go, can you put them in order?
That would be fun.
Could you taste them and actually put them from youngest to
So
oldest?
now going through this, I feel like I would be better at it, but asking somebody that's never had...
Yeah.
I mean, if we gave the details of each vintage and kind of our tasting notes, maybe that would be a possibility.
So maybe it's still the kind of foresty floral leaf. Maybe that's that Zinfandel marker that's letting me know that regardless of some of these flavors, it's still Zinfandel.
Yeah, and the tannins are never going to be as big as... Bordeaux Cabernet tannins, even Merlot tannins and Cab Franc tannins are going to be bigger than this.
It's funny as I see these other wine regions emerge and you look at the popularity of Zinfandel drinkers, and I love all of y'all out there. You Zap guys are just my favorite crew, man. You know how to roll, man. But it's funny that you don't see new emerging wine regions. They didn't plant Zinfandel in Chile. They didn't plant Zen in Argentina. They didn't plant it in Australia. They didn't, it's like, why is it so California specific, man?
Where would you plant Zen? If you had control of the whole planet.
Yes.
Which I assume you think you do. Where are you planning to plant Zinfandel?
If I was going to plant Zinfandel, I would probably plant it in Amador County. I would probably plant it out east of Sacramento. Zinfandel responds really well to heat, and there is an interesting... with the water inland, but the deep water channel that goes all the way to Sacramento, there's enough of a marine influence that can actually cool that whole region. But Zinfandel requires acidity for it to make sense, and I think if I was going to plant Zinfandel, Amador would be my absolute home run champion. Or I would plant the top of Howe Mountain.
So
those are my 2 areas.
He just got the entire planet, and he still thinks that California is the best place in the world to grow.
Hands down. Hands down.
I mean, California is desert, right? And it likes hot, dry areas that have the cool down. So, yeah, I mean, I was thinking, and I'm sure Temecula has experimented with it. It gets pretty hot inland Temecula. So I'd be curious to see or Rancho Santa Fe-esque.
And the funny thing is, when it comes to Pinot and Cabernet and Chardonnay and all these other grapes that we grow, and even Sauvignon Blanc, we don't talk about clones with Zinfandel.
Yeah.
It's just like you get what you get,
I'm sure there are, too.
So, what is the last year of Coeur Du Val?
That's a great question. I tried to do that homework here at Elyse, and what I've been able to ascertain is this is it. This is your Coeur Du Val like run.
So
What about, no, I think 98, 99.
Are you think?
I feel because there,
Alright.
remember the blue kind of watercolor type label?
Yes.
I remember seeing those in Magnums.
All right.
I'm going to take a
I
look.
feel
Yeah,
I would
thank you.
say
We'll
92
get
to
back that
99.
answer. I think what started to happen is, and this is the thing is, as we got past 97 and we started to change the farming and the nature, I think you started to see the blending of those two sites becoming more of single vineyard approaches and less of the
The last we have is 98.
thank you,
All right.
98. There you go. Yeah, which is probably the lowest quantity we have, which is why I probably didn't include it in the flight. 98's, I think we'll have this. I think we're going to do a show coming up where we put 97 against 98. We might try something different, and we might bring other friends from other wineries in to do
Cool.
97 against 98. I
That'd
think
be
that would
fun.
be a really fun show. And again, the other show, Susan Dubrow, I know you're out there. I know you're watching.
The Riedels.
We want to do the Riedel tasting where we do a flight like this in our AP and then a really specifically Zinfandel glass. I would love to really see what the...
Also, another shout out to the Durand
Yes, it
and
helped us
Christopher.
extract...
Extracted all these corks. Look, they're all intact.
Yes.
They
This
don't actually make any kickbacks when they just love this stupid thing.
But I do
Yeah.
love displaying a
True.
cork. And maybe I was just one of that group of Psalms that was different than the rest of the crew. I felt like the cork, especially when you get to the production side, is as much a dedication to anything else you do in the wine business. So I was always a big proponent of taking the foil off the top of the bottle and creating a saddle. And I always like to put the cork in front of the bottle on the table. And some restaurants looked at that as leaving sort of like your empty sugar packet or some kind of, table maintenance.
it's part
It
of
was
the
an
art. It's part of the
But
presentation.
to me, it was part of the
Yeah.
entire experience, and some people like to see the physical cork and look at it and play with it. So anyway, this was always my style,
that.
was to cradle the cork and let people enjoy the entire experience. And
That's great. 95 is great.
Look at that, man! What a
Cheers.
surprise, huh, man? You know.
And the corks are beautiful looking.
Mm-hmm.
And you can see just, well, I don't know if you can see. It's a dark cork. The cork ran, and so there's wine all over it. The wine is in beautiful condition.
But the other ones are
It'd be
pristine.
yeah, they're all in perfect condition. And this is, I mean, hey, it held up. I'd be curious to taste another of this 92, and
Yeah.
I like it as is, but there might be bottle variation just because this cork did run. Just because you see a cork like this, that should cause some area of concern, but it doesn't mean the wine is bad. And I would say this wine is not bad. There's nothing wrong with it. But it would take me opening another bottle to see bottle variation.
In
Pull the next
'92,
one out to show people what a perfect cork looks like.
in '92, the percentage of people that had computers at home was what, 2%? And by the time we get to 97, it goes up to 20%. By the time we get to 07, it becomes 80%.
Well, and now, yeah, I was just reading what Amarim is doing. So thank you, PJ from Amarim. But they've
Cork
gotten
producers.
really into all the scientific to try and eliminate TCA. And so
Yeah.
now they guarantee every single cork.
It's like
which
eliminating
is
hate.
wild.
That's a tough mission, man.
I think they know that we'll just be drunk, and when we get a cork bottle, we'll forget and like toss it and not even tell them about it.
Oh, the 96. She's got a story to tell, too. See, you blind me on this 96, I'm all over the Rhone Valley. This is saddle leather, and this is that coat roti. I mean, this is just screaming. That's beautiful.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I've had a 25-year-old Cote Roti, but I would think color would kind of tip you off right away. But once you get that old, it's going to turn
So
orange.
the thing about 96 for this flight is interesting is this was the heaviest rain year of this entire flight.
Yep.
This was like the biggest rain year. But that meant that when rain hits a vine and it's still got these little teeny tiny little white flowers on it, the rain knocks those flowers off. So once again, 96 is one of these years where weather on the map
Low
was a
yield.
nightmare, but it lowered the yields and it concentrated the flavors later on in the harvest. Patience, I think, is the toughest lesson for some of our great farmers, in that when a winemaker and a grower get together and look at a vineyard by math, there are some panics that can happen going, these numbers are all right here. I need to pick tomorrow. And yet the seed is green as all get out. The flesh of the grape is still attached to it. There's no physiological ripeness. This is part of the learning curve we're tasting through today is we've learned that the vine can give you mathematical ripeness, but there's a physical, there's a flavor ripeness and a texture ripeness that's a whole other aspect to the grape. And that's where the learning curve started to happen in this era of winemaking. And so I look at vintages like 96 and I can totally see a farmer going, oh my God, the bricks are climbing. The rain has been horrible. They shattered my vineyard. My yields are down 30%. I got to get this stuff picked. Nobody's going to want it at 26 bricks. You know?
Yeah, it's so interesting. Back in the day, I was when I first came on with Elyse, when Cheryl and Josh took over. I was looking up Ray Corson and some old podcasts that he did. And these are all blends of Santa Helena and Rutherford, which predominantly Rutherford would be Morrisoli.
Yes.
And at one point, he lived on the Morrisoli vineyard in a guest cottage. And he said over time, he had gotten so used to this vineyard, and it was 90% Zinfandel in that Morrisoli vineyard, which is right back here. But then within that same old block, that 2-acre block of Old Vine Zin, there were other. Yeah. Being Alicante Boucher and Black Muscat and
Hamburg. Don't forget Black Hamburg.
Never even heard of it. But add an ER and I'm hungry.
It's a German version of Black Muscat.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So he was in this
Thank
podcast.
You, Sounds for logging on and telling me how wrong I am.
He in this podcast, you'll be surprised how often he's right. I think he's lying, but it turns out to fact check. So in this vineyard, he said over time he just always saw that when he figured out it was ready to pick, that this Black Muscat vine, and possibly the only one in the whole vineyard, was always at a certain stage. And so he knew in years in the future, look at that Black Muscat vine and it'll tell you when to pick the whole vineyard. So that was really cool for me.
The Italians used to use the black figs for that.
Oh, interesting. That makes sense.
You picked your black figs, your black mission figs brought by the Spaniards. Thank you very much. You picked them the first week of July. If the little stem still milked, you knew it was a later harvest. If it was lush and ripe and you ate it right away, you knew you were picking earlier.
It's like the groundhog in July.
Totally, man.
So Donna Scala,
Garrett woke up this morning and saw his own shadow. So 6 more weeks of COVID, you know. Yeah.
That's why I have the hair up today. I just want to make sure I'm as safe as possible. Also, I got tired of those Weird Al comments last week. Thanks a lot. No, but Donna Scala and Giovanni Scala have this Black Mission fig tree
to those
outside.
two, man. One of the greatest restaurants. Man, this is one of these.
Support your local restaurants.
Oh my God, this is
great pickup.
Also, I just saw on their Instagram that they're doing sandwiches to go now too. I mean, good on Giovanni and Scott.
Get out there and order food to go from your restaurants. If there's any industry that's just taking it in the absolute chops right now, the poor restaurant guys. I mean, they're doing their best to get creative about curbside pickup.
Oh man, they're doing parklets and tents, and now they can't use either of those. And
they're down to like 3 or 4 people staffs to run a whole week. I mean, just help them out as best you can out there. And some of them are doing pretty dynamic. You know, thank you for a lot of the local sort of governments to go. You can take alcohol to go. Most of them have got deals on their wine list to just move those bottles out of the cellar.
Sure.
Grab a bottle of wine from the restaurant in addition to the meal you're getting, man. Seriously, you could really help them out.
And also, kudos to all of you restaurants. I know some of you absolutely can't do it because you're scraping by. Yeah. But there's a lot of restaurants, even though they can't do it, that are doing lunches for essential workers. Yes. And it's really cool to see when they barely have a leg to stand on, they're still helping others.
Yeah. So please, man, help
cheers
those guys out.
We to you guys. We both came from that industry, so we feel for you guys. We're there for you.
Just because we serve you doesn't mean we like you. Come on, anybody. Log on. Anybody. I want stories right now, Instagram and Facebook. I want 3 really great waiters and bartenders to send me a great story right now, man.
Not about us, though.
No.
And if it is, private message. We have to approve it first.
One of the great things about working in that industry is the pirates that you go out to sea with and the stories. And you find yourself all of a sudden in a restaurant with people that have been out on the QE2 in their fine dining room, or somebody that worked at Le Arpege in Paris, and all of a sudden they're with us. And
the stories we told at a random pool that we would take over in Yountville at 4 a.m. because we got off at 2 a.m. The Yount Vegas days.
Yount Vegas, man. All right, we gotta close the show strong, man. We're going 97. Anybody that's a Cabernet drinker knows 97 like they know nothing else. 97 was the year that California roared. We had great scores in the 80s. 85, 6, and 7 put us on the map in terms of the press. Yes, we'd won the Paris tasting, but the 80s really put us on the map. Then you had the Marvin Shankins of the world launching Spectator that made wine so much more understandable, and glossy photographs. And
the Screaming Eagle and the auction. What was that, 90?
God bless Bob Parker and his tongue. The evolution of creating that riper wine kind of sensation for the planet. I absolutely love that. This is an era where 97 to me is, if we're going to write one of those historical timelines, that's one of the changes in history. 97 changed everything. I think it was Camus once again. Their special select was the absolute must-have wine of that year.
Actually, wine of the year. I remember buying this. I worked at the Glen Ellen Inn. Went to Sonoma State. Or maybe it was Spectator's wine of the year. Mm-hmm. It was 97 Insignia.
I'm going to argue with him. I'm going to let him get away with that. It was 97 Special Select. 96 Insignia was 3 years later, because after that it was the Paloma. No, you're right.
Yeah, Paloma was like 01 or something.
01, yeah, you're right. I'll stop talking.
Excluding 18 and 19, what's your favorite epic vintage from them? I took away the things you're supposed to say.
2010.
2010.
Well.
97. No, 94. No, 92. No, wait a minute. 01. No, wait a minute.
Well, if you look at our wines, the 01, 02, 03, Morris Holy and Tejan Cabs are awesome.
Yeah.
I think 97, like you said, put Napa kind of on the map. I think 91 and 94 put it on the map, and maybe 97 did, and so people retrospectively looked at 94 and like, oh my God, that's amazing too. For me, I think I've become more fruit oriented. And for people that love California wines and Napa Cabs, 12, 14, 16, and 18, boom, they're just you're going to get fruit, but there's also amazing balance to them.
Isn't that funny? Because I was always taught in Napa that the odd years were your better bets, your even years were always going to be your trickier bets.
Do you do that in roulette too?
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's why we're losers.
Well, if anybody knows me, odd is pretty much,
Elaine would agree. But she loves his oddities.
That watches every show. She's the only one, I think, other than you, Bradley Nelson. I know you're out there, man. Don't pretend like you're not.
And you, Bradley Cooper.
Yeah, several regulars.
Oh, man. And I got to tell you, it's really been our regulars, McCready out there, telling us about older wine. I love drinking with experienced cellar
we learn a lot.
wine drinkers, because their perception of a wine is so much different than me coming out of this like fresh fruit intense. Like, I'm drinking 2019s. That's what I know. And I love seeing that kind of perspective, because I'm a fruit-driven wine drinker.
Wow. Well, then this is your favorite.
Oh my God!
This still has a lot of fruit to it, and I wouldn't say that about 97 Cabs as much.
And how much 97 do we have left?
2 cases.
0.
Change. Yeah.
0. 2 cases.
Unfortunately, he drank the last of the Magnums, but there are some of the 750s left.
Yeah, I did the bendy straw trick with a Magnum. Really works if you want to go to 0 to 60 in no time.
But 97 for me was 97 Special Select. I was in the alleyway behind Trevigne back in the day with 97 Harlan Estate.
What else were you doing in that back alley?
Well, there was breaks between, lunch and when we were doing 1,200 covers, back in the
12-hour days.
Chef Carello, if you're watching us, that's when we ate all of your food was in that little storage closet underneath the staircase. We just were all waiters, enjoy some of the finest meals on the planet.
Well, that's kudos to the food. Like, if the staff wants to eat it off the guest plate.
I
And
had-
that means it's good.
I had never worked in a restaurant that could do over 1,000 covers, and there was not a single plate coming back to the kitchen. It was just love affair, Hollywood, like it was the center of the universe back in the day. And thank God for diversity. Napa's become a much more dynamic restaurant scene. But that being said, good Lord, man, all these restaurants, we were just coming out of, I love French and Italian food, don't get me wrong, but our diversity was just climbing. We were just getting there, man. And so, look, there are gals, Barbara Alexander, if you're ever on social media up on How Mountain, there are chefs out there that are creating these weekly pickup meals. We are creatively trying to survive this whole thing, and I think creativity is going to be our new word, man.
I just saw a hot wing challenge from the guy at Heritage Eats. He's diversifying a lot. Good on you.
Yeah.
Gary
Have you done the hot wing challenge?
I'm not. No, that's not a challenge I need to do.
You don't want to do that?
I'll drink while you do the hot wing challenge.
Oh my God, we should. Cheryl's got a good palate. We should do a hot wing challenge with Cheryl.
Yeah.
To have the record at the Buffalo Wild Wings in like St. Louis for hot wing.
Whoa, in St. Louis too. Those are hot.
So we're gonna do this as a competition. We're gonna have 10 wings leading towards the middle, and who can get who has to tap out going, I actually can't eat
Also,
that.
so
I
I mean,
can eat all of them.
This is
there
so
it
this
is.
is
It's down.
actually
now,
we should get him to interview you. This is a shameless plug. Well, shameless. I don't know. Well, because I'm not getting paid, so it's shameless. But the hot ones, YouTube it, and you'll see
it's the greatest.
some
I
of
love
your
that
favorite
show.
people,
It's awesome, man.
whether it's Justin Timberlake, Gordon Ramsay, Shaquille O'Neal, Padma Lakshmi, all being interviewed with hot sauces. Kevin Hart, excellent. And it gets up to like 2 million Scoville units if you've ever
so
seen
in my
it.
world, remember the line from Matrix? You don't really know somebody until you fight them.
Yeah.
And
that's
you don't know somebody until you watch them take
and
spice
all these
man.
actors that are used to just
Yeah.
being able to spin city roll with anything, now they're like drunk off hot sauce and they are as honest as it gets, and you see them and then they're like rubbing their eyes with their hot sauce fingers. That's pretty awesome. Check it out.
I've also done the Fall Curry Challenge in New York at the Brick Lane Curry House, which is all fall, like the ghost chili peppers.
Oh yeah.
And that was like eating molten cigarette ash.
Yeah, molten cigarette ash.
Whoa.
You can't drink the
When was the
mango
first
latte.
time you did that?
I've had a certificate on my fridge for a while. But you can't drink the mango lassi till the end because the relief is too sweet. You just have to eat the whole thing.
Yes.
Interesting. I
My
like the
tip
mango
is
lassi
wait
call.
5 minutes out of your allocated 15 to let it cool down physically first.
All right,
I'd go
so
for the
Tony, all of you
bong
out there
lassi
now,
and then-
we will sell you the 97, but you can't have just that. You've got to take the other kids.
Well, I don't know. I mean,
The 97
just
is
because he
awesome.
loves that fruit, I knew that would be his favorite, but and it is good. I got to revisit.
The 95 might have been a
95 might
surprise.
be my
Yeah,
favorite. I
yeah.
like the 94. I mean, I really like them all. I probably have to revisit the
And
96
we did a
because I
tasting
forgot about it
earlier
already.
where we were pairing our wines with more accessible food choices. And the 96,
Yeah, that's good.
when you smell it and taste it later, it's Dinty Moore stew. It's literally,
It's what?
It's got the Dinty Moore stew. It's literally like the pot roast with the carrots and the onions and the potatoes. It is roasted tomatoes. It is everything I need in a hearty meal on a rainy day. Now that being said, we had torrential downpours yesterday, and we are having one of
Oh,
those
did we have it here too?
beautiful, quick little spring glimmers of sunshine today, man. It was beautiful.
I was in Russian River the last 2 days, and yesterday morning it was torrential. So I didn't know what was going on here. Makes sense that it was the same.
So there's this great couple of sections of the Russian River where it's one of the great challenges. The water's only 3 feet deep, but walking upriver, upstream is one of the greatest workouts in the history, man. And it's beautiful water coming off the mountains, man.
Also, I poured myself a little extra of the 96, just so I could talk about something I tell everybody. If you're going wine to wine, make sure that you take 2 sips of something right after another one. So my first sip is, I'm going to demonstrate.
Yes. That's what a sip is. Oh, and this spit.
Well, just I've had a lot already.
Yeah.
But that's the mouthwash, so it coats your palate and then sets the stage. This is a judge-worthy
Yes.
sip. That first one is competing against that.
Yes.
So this is the way to, and don't worry about spitting. You're gonna get a buzz if you want to.
At the end of the day, you know.
See, now I have a perfect conception of that 96, and that's delicious. I think I might go
All
out
right,
on
so
my
I know
favorite,
the show
the
ran
95.
long today. I appreciate your patience.
Yeah, we did not
but
expect it to, but we actually
really-
really like the wines.
I really wanted to get through all 6 of these wines. I thought it was an interesting vertical. I really thought the historical little journey was really interesting.
Yeah,
today.
well done.
I really, I can't say this enough. The dedication, the faithful following, the fact that you are helping us, we're all going to get through this together. But seriously, if you have a European palate and you're thinking about older wines and ageability, jump in on this vertical. We'll do a Zoom tasting with you where we'll drink through them with you. And it would be I think it would be fascinating. You don't have to worry about aging the wine or talking about what it's going to do. We can illustrate it for you and we can do this for you at home. So cheers to y'all.
Thanks for tuning in. Enjoy.
And don't be afraid to log on and tell us what you want us to drink in front of you next.
Absolutely.